Rain fell in cold sheets across the Neridian hillside, each drop spattering against the worn stone of the memorial with a sharp, steady rhythm. Rick Carter stood alone, his dark combat jacket soaked through, hands buried deep in his pockets as he stared at the monument in silence. Anira. Even thinking her name hurt. It had been 3 weeks since the battle at Neridian Pass, 3 weeks since she had disappeared in the firestorm that obliterated the mountainside. Coalition reports had declared her dead, her body unrecoverable. They'd even held a funeral. He'd stood there, said his words, saluted her memory. But it hadn't helped. You deserved better, he murmured to the stone. The alien glyphs carved into the base glowed faintly, a language he couldn't read. He'd been told they translated to something like hero of two worlds. Rick didn't feel like a hero. Not without her. He reached out, fingertips grazing the smooth stone, trying to remember the warmth of her skin, the way her voice used to curl around his name like a secret. Everything had gone cold since she vanished. You always said I was too stubborn to let go, he whispered. Maybe you were right. You were definitely right. Rick spun. His hand went to his sidearm, instincts honed by years of war snapping to attention. She stood 10 paces away. Anira. Red-skinned, white-haired, and very much alive. His weapon fell from his fingers. Anira, he breathed, disbelief crashing over him. She smiled, lips curling just enough to be familiar. Took you long enough. He stepped forward, then froze. His mind spun. Hallucination. Clone. Implant glitch. He wanted to believe, but couldn't afford another heartbreak. She reached out, pressing her hand to his chest. Warm. Real. How? He asked, voice hoarse. Emergency teleport, she said. Experimental. Knocked me out for 2 weeks. By the time I woke up, you were gone. Rick stared into her eyes. Something had changed in her. She looked the same. But harder. Faster. Like the edges of her had been sharpened by something unseen. I saw the blast, he said. I saw you fall. I almost didn't make it. But I'm here. And we need to talk. Not here. Not in the open. Come with me. He hesitated for only a second before nodding. The storm above seemed to lessen as they descended the hill together. His world had just tilted on its axis again. Anira was alive. And he wasn't ready for what came next. Rick followed Anira down the winding slope of the memorial hill, his boots squelching in the wet grass. Questions burned in his mind, but her pace left little room for conversation. She moved like a ghost, silent, focused, too fluid to be someone who had been presumed dead 3 weeks ago. He couldn't stop staring at her. He had loved her in the quiet way soldiers love someone they're not allowed to touch. It was easier in the field, where every mission could be their last. Easy to bury the truth under the weight of protocols and orders. But now, seeing her again, alive, altered, everything he thought he knew had cracked. Where are we going? He asked as they approached a transport parked beneath a weathered tree at the edge of the road. Safe place, she said, not meeting his gaze. My quarters. Rick frowned. You're staying in the city? It's complicated. She keyed a code into the sleek control panel, and the vehicle's door hissed open. He ducked inside after her, the interior warm and dimly lit. The hum of the engine kicked in as they pulled away from the hill. You could have told me, he said after a long silence. When you woke up. She didn't answer right away. I tried. But I wasn't cleared to contact anyone. He gave her a sideways glance. Cleared by who? She hesitated. Intelligence branch. They handled my recovery. Rick leaned back in his seat, studying her more closely. She didn't look injured. If anything, she seemed stronger than before. Tighter. More efficient. You said it was experimental tech that saved you. What kind of experiment are we talking about? Anira's fingers tapped lightly against the control panel. A nervous tick, except she never used to fidget. The kind that doesn't have a name, she said softly. Not yet. Rick didn't like the sound of that. Were you enhanced? She looked at him then, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Yes. He processed the weight of that word in silence as the transport merged into the arterial flow of Neridian traffic, lights reflecting on the slick pavement outside. Do you regret it? He asked. Anira's gaze dropped. I regret that it made me someone you might not recognize. Rick reached over and took her hand. It was warmer than he remembered. I recognize you. She looked at their joined hands, the corners of her lips twitching into a faint smile. We'll see. Her apartment was buried in the diplomatic quarter of Neridian City, tucked inside a tower of obsidian glass and silver veining that shimmered under the night sky. She led him up a narrow lift, silent the entire time. The doors slid open to a wide space with towering windows and almost no furniture. Spartan. Cold. Temporary. You living here? Rick asked, stepping inside. It's not permanent, she replied, locking the door behind her. Just while I sort things out. Rick moved to the window. Below them, the city shimmered in quiet neon. No signs of the war that had nearly consumed it. Drink, Anira offered. Sure. Something strong. She retrieved 2 small glasses and a bottle of Neridian whiskey, pale amber and sweet with a burn that crept up slow. He took the glass and drank, eyes never leaving her. How bad was it? He asked finally. Anira sat across from him. Waking up alone, confused, restrained, not knowing who I was at first. I had dreams of you, of the mission. But they didn't feel like memories. Not until later. And the enhancements? She held up her hand, fingers steady. Muscle density, nerve response, vision. All tuned past regulation limits. I heal faster, react quicker. But that's not all. What else? Anira lowered her voice. They implanted something. Near my spine. A tracker, I think. Maybe more. Rick's jaw tightened. You let them do that to you? I didn't have a choice, she said. I was dying. They saved me, but not for free. Rick stood, pacing to the far wall. And now? Now I'm under surveillance. They say it's to ensure I'm stable. But I think they're watching for something else. Maybe testing how much control they really have. Do you trust them? Anira met his eyes. I trust you. That simple statement hit him like a blow. Before he could speak, the apartment's alarm chimed, a soft, pulsing note. Anira was up instantly, crossing to the console. What is it? Rick asked, moving to her side. Security breach, she muttered. Level 3. Motion sensors tripped on the exterior balcony. Rick drew his sidearm without hesitation. You expecting company? Not tonight. The lights flickered. Then went out. Emergency lighting bathed the room in blue. Anira gestured toward the hallway. Bedroom. We'll regroup there. Rick followed her lead, heart pounding. Whatever this was, it wasn't a coincidence. They were being hunted. Anira closed the door softly behind them. They crouched by the far wall, backs to the bed. You armed? Rick asked. Always, she pulled a compact plasma pistol from her thigh holster. Glass shattered in the next room. Rick and Anira exchanged a glance. He nodded once. Go. Anira moved like lightning, vaulting the bed and sprinting for the main room. Rick followed seconds later, catching sight of 3 figures in dark armor pouring through the broken window. No insignias. No lights. Just shadows with guns. Mercs. Anira struck first, a blur of motion and fire. Her first shot took one in the shoulder, sending him spinning. Her foot caught another in the jaw with enough force to crack a helmet. Rick fired into the third's chest, watching him crumple. But more were coming. "Fall back," he shouted. Anira grabbed one of the fallen mercs by the collar and yanked something from his belt, a detonator. She tossed it toward the window. A moment later, a concussive blast lit the room, buying them seconds. Back in the hallway, she keyed a hidden panel in the wall. A portion of the floor opened, revealing a narrow passage beneath. "Maintenance tunnel," she explained, already climbing down. Rick followed. The hatch slid shut above them. "How'd they find us?" he asked, breath ragged. "That implant," she said bitterly. "I thought it was dormant." They navigated through the tight space in silence, boots echoing on metal. The city above felt distant now, like another world. "Do you have another safe house?" Rick asked. "Yes. Old industrial sector. It's off the grid." "Good. But it won't last forever." "I need help, Rick. I need to get this thing out of me." He looked at her, her face drawn in the emergency light. "Then we find someone who can." Anira reached for his hand again. "You don't have to stay. This isn't your fight." He squeezed her fingers. "It is now." Her smile was weary, but grateful. "Still stubborn." "Always." And together, they moved into the shadows, the war not yet over, but the spark between them brighter than ever. Cold, metallic air clung to Rick's skin as he and Anira stepped out of the maintenance tunnel and into the forgotten bones of Neridian City's industrial sector. Massive, rusting beams loomed overhead, like the fossilized ribs of some mechanical beast. Flickering blue light sputtered along the cracked ceiling, casting fractured shadows across their path. Rick adjusted his grip on the pulse pistol he'd drawn back at the apartment, eyes scanning the darkness. Anira walked beside him, posture alert but clearly weakening. The implant was taking its toll, he could see it in her slightly unsteady gait, in the way her fingers occasionally twitched as if reacting to signals only she could hear. "How much farther?" he asked. "For blocks," she said, her voice thinner than before. "Old shipping depot. Dr. Terrace keeps her clinic underneath the structure." She paused to lean against a wall. "Rick, if we don't make it." "We will," he cut her off, stepping close. "Don't start thinking like that. Just stay on your feet." Anira met his gaze. Her eyes still held that faint unnatural glow, but he could see the real her behind it. The woman who'd fought beside him, laughed with him, challenged him in every battle. The woman he thought he'd lost. He placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, firm and reassuring. "Come on," he said. "One block at a time." The depot looked abandoned from the outside, a crumbling structure covered in years of grime and half-obscured coalition propaganda. Anira led them to a rusted delivery bay and pressed her palm against what appeared to be an ordinary shipping crate. A blue scan light passed over her hand, and with a low hiss, the ground beneath them shifted. A hidden platform descended into darkness. Rick kept his weapon raised as they dropped below street level. They were entering a place the coalition had forgotten, or more likely, chose to ignore. Shadows thickened around them, but the air grew warmer, tinged with sterilization chemicals and faint hums of advanced machinery. When the lift settled, an automated door slid open, revealing a wide chamber that looked more like a surgical suite than anything else. Strange tools lined the walls, glowing softly with embedded power cores. Makeshift beds, reinforced doors, and biometric scanners dotted the room. An older Neridian woman stood waiting. "Project Phoenix," she said before they could speak. Her voice was rough, clipped, clinical. "I was told one of you might show up sooner or later." "Dr. Terrace," Anira rasped. "I need help. Now." Terrace wasted no time. She gestured toward the closest bed. "Strip the upper layers and lie down. Quickly." Rick watched as Anira climbed onto the table and unzipped her armored suit halfway, revealing red skin mottled with faint, glowing lines. The implant's infection ran deeper than he'd expected, her veins pulsed with unnatural light. "How long has it been since the enhancement protocol?" Terrace asked as she prepped her instruments. 3 weeks, Anira said. Symptoms: tremors, auditory hallucinations, rage spikes, difficulty separating thoughts. Terrace nodded grimly. Typical. The version they gave you must have had neural feedback failsafes. "Can you remove it?" Rick asked, stepping closer. "Maybe," Terrace replied. "But it's not just a tracker. It's a full spinal interface, laced into her nervous system. Removal could kill her." Rick's jaw tightened. "Then what's the alternative?" "Let it take her." Terrace didn't answer. Instead, she activated a handheld scanner and passed it slowly along Anira's back. The device chimed with unsettling regularity. Terrace frowned. "They've upgraded the tech since I last saw it. Whoever did this wasn't just trying to keep tabs on her. They were rewriting who she is." Anira clenched her jaw. "I figured. I can dampen the signal for now," Terrace said. "But to remove it? I need time. And specialized tools. And even then." Rick moved beside the bed and took Anira's hand. "She's not dying in a basement lab. You understand me? If you have a way to save her, you do it." Terrace held his gaze, then nodded. "I'll do what I can. But you need to hold the perimeter. This place isn't exactly unnoticed. You led them here, even if you didn't mean to." Outside the lab, Rick rigged old security drones as makeshift sentries, placing proximity charges along the upper vents and locking down the main access tunnel. He checked his gear, low on ammunition, pulse pistol at half charge, but still better than nothing. When he returned to the surgical bay, Terrace had fitted Anira with a neural dampener. Her body twitched less now, and her eyes had closed. She looked peaceful. Like the woman he used to see between battles, when they were just themselves. Terrace motioned him over. "She's stable. For now." Rick brushed a hand through Anira's white hair, gently. "How long will the procedure take?" 3 hours. Maybe more if I try to extract the implant whole. It has encrypted data, and if it's what I think, it might be valuable." "What kind of data?" "Coalition Black Ops intel. Weapon schematics. Possibly fleet positions. Something they stole from the Keldari." Rick swore under his breath. "And they just plugged it into her. Without telling her." "She was a perfect courier," Terrace said. "Enhanced, disposable, loyal. They probably never meant to extract her. But she survived. Only just." Rick stood watch as Terrace began the operation. He moved like a shadow around the edges of the clinic, checking corners, listening for sounds that didn't belong. The hours dragged. Outside, the storm picked up again, a hollow wind whistling through the gaps in the industrial wreckage. His mind kept drifting, memories of their missions, the way Anira used to laugh when he made bad jokes, how her fingers lingered too long on his shoulder after a successful operation. The nights they sat under twin moons drinking contraband coffee, knowing it couldn't last, knowing they wanted it to anyway. He'd thought he buried those memories along with her name. And now here she was, still fighting. He couldn't lose her again. 2.5 hours in, Terrace gave a sharp intake of breath. "I've isolated it. But, it's evolving." "What does that mean?" "The implant is adjusting in real time. Learning. Adapting to stimuli. Like an AI. Worse. It's biological too. Partially organic. If I don't sever its neural stem in the next 60 seconds, it'll initiate a shutdown sequence. She won't wake up." Rick felt a surge of panic. "Then what are you waiting for?" Terrace worked quickly, her orange hands moving with machine precision. A long minute passed. Anira convulsed once. Then went still. Rick rushed to her side. What happened? Signal blocked. Implant removed. She's unconscious, but alive. Rick let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Terrace placed a small, crystalline device on the table. This is it. The whole thing. Encrypted. Fragile. And dangerous. Can we access it? Not here. Not safely. But maybe at a coalition decryption bay. Assuming we can convince them not to throw us in a black cell first. Rick scoffed. I'm not trusting them with her again. You might not have a choice. If this data is what I think it is, it could be the only way to stop what's coming. Rick didn't like it. But he also didn't like the alternative. He sat beside Anira, brushing her hair back from her damp forehead. I promised I'd protect you. Guess that includes from the people who were supposed to be on our side. Her eyes fluttered. Rick? Right here. You're safe. She tried to sit up, but her muscles rebelled. Rick helped her gently. Feels like my spine got kicked by a starship, she muttered. You felt worse. Remember Raxian Base? She smiled faintly. You mean when you blew up the medbay trying to cook? Exactly. They sat in silence for a while. Then she looked at the device on the table. That came out of me. Yeah. Terrace thinks it holds something important. Maybe intel on a Kaldari weapon. Anira nodded slowly. Then we find out what. And we stop it. Rick looked at her, admiration and fear mingling. You just got out of surgery. I'm not sitting out this fight. Not now. Not ever. Her hand found his. And I'm not leaving you again. Rick nodded. The storm was far from over. But they were together again. And that meant hope. Hyperspace bled into stillness as the stealth shuttle dropped out near the Kaldari system's edge. Stars snapped back into view, sharp and unblinking against the dark canvas of space. Rick sat at the pilot's console, hands steady on the controls, gaze locked on the looming spidery outline ahead, the Kaldari stellar destabilizer. We're in position, he said, glancing at the sensor readings. Anira stood behind him, adjusting the straps on her radiation suit. Though her body had not yet fully recovered from the implant's extraction, her mind burned with focus. No glow shimmered in her veins now, no artificial heat radiated from her skin, she was wholly herself, and perhaps for that reason more dangerous than ever. Radiation field is live, she confirmed. The closer we get, the less interference we can hide behind. We've got one shot at this. Rick adjusted their heading toward the rear maintenance dock of the weapon platform. 32 minutes until they begin the calibration to target Valus Prime. If we're not out by then we don't get out. He looked over his shoulder. We're coming back, Anira. We promised. She didn't smile, but the touch she placed on his shoulder spoke volumes. Reassurance. Trust. A quiet bond forged through fire. The destabilizer loomed like an angular starfish orbiting the captured asteroid that powered its core. Massive collector arms stretched toward the nearby sun, siphoning raw solar energy into the central emitter array. The shuttle engaged docking protocols. A soft thump vibrated through the floor as clamps sealed them to the facility's underside. Rick and Anira moved fast. Suited up, oxygen lines clipped, weapons holstered, tools magnetized to their belts. Every step counted now. Entry point clear, Anira said, lowering her visor. External radiation minimal but rising. 2 levels to the emitter chamber. I still remember the layout. Good. You lead. They slipped into the maintenance shaft, gravity re-engaging inside the platform. The corridors were dimly lit, emergency red lighting pulsing at intervals. Automated servos buzzed overhead, performing their endless upkeep on the massive reactor systems. Rick kept his weapon raised, scanning the corners. "You nervous?" he asked. "I'm terrified," Anira said, not slowing. "But fears never stopped me before. Didn't stop us at Meridian Pass either. Or on Caldex Station. Or when we kissed in the middle of that munitions convoy under fire." Anira gave a dry chuckle. "Still the worst timing. Best decision." Her fingers brushed his gloved hand briefly before they reached the shaft junction. The moment passed, replaced by hard focus. "This is it," she said. "Emitter access corridor straight ahead. Security checkpoint just beyond that." Rick pulled a compact sabotage kit from his pouch. "Ready to blow the cooling relay?" Anira nodded. "Target the left regulator column. We overheat the emitter core, and the whole thing collapses." Simple. Deadly. They entered the corridor at a sprint. Motion sensors picked them up immediately. "Intruder alert," a sterile voice rang. "Unauthorized presence in Sector 7. Go," Anira shouted. They split left and right, ducking behind structural supports. Pulse fire erupted from automated turrets, searing the air between them. Rick slid under a security gate, shot a turret out mid-spin, and vaulted over a pressure pipe. Anira reached the coolant regulator. Her hands moved in a blur, unkissing the override panel. Circuit sparked as she bypassed the hard-coded lockouts. Rick laid suppressing fire against a fresh wave of Caldari troops pouring through a sealed bulkhead. How long? 70 seconds. He ducked another barrage, firing blind. Make it 40. You can't rush a meltdown. You've never seen me try. An explosion rocked the corridor as Rick tossed a compression grenade down the hallway. It detonated with a low, throat-humming boom, flinging the attackers backward. Anira's eyes flashed with triumph. Done. Cooling lines will surge in 60. Let's move. They backtracked toward the maintenance shaft. The floor beneath them began to tremble as superheated plasma coursed into fragile containment coils. "This place is going to blow," Rick said. "Not before we're gone." They reached the shaft entrance. Another squad cut them off. Too many. Too close. Anira pushed Rick toward a side corridor. "This way. There's another dock access, old supply route. We split up, we lose each other. We split up, we survive. Trust me." He nodded, trusting her as he always had. Rick ducked into the side tunnel, looping toward the supply hangar. Every step echoed with urgency. His suit's radiation monitor began blinking yellow. Too much exposure. Too long. He reached the hangar, found an old emergency shuttle half-collapsed against the wall. Power systems offline. He slammed his fist into the panel, praying. Lights flickered. Then stabilized. "Thank you," he whispered. As the engines whined to life, he activated the internal beacon. It pulsed once. Twice. No response. Then a chime. "Rick," Anira's voice came through the comm. "I've got a ride. Coordinates pinged. Get here now. On my way. Hold tight." He exhaled slowly, watching fire begin to lick the far end of the chamber. The emitter core had destabilized. Energy was surging outward in plasma arcs, ripping through internal conduits. A door burst open behind him. Anira stumbled through, helmet cracked, blood trailing down her cheek. "I'm in," she panted. Rick pulled her into the seat beside him and sealed the cockpit. "Strap in. I'm getting us out of here." The shuttle lifted off, shuddering as the entire destabilizer platform erupted beneath them. Fire consumed the emitter core. The collector arms folded inward like broken limbs. A final surge of white-hot light tore the station apart. The shuttle cleared the blast radius with seconds to spare. Rick didn't breathe until stars replaced the inferno behind them. "We made it," Anira whispered, head leaning against his shoulder. He took her hand and held it all the way back to Allied space.